So every time there was a shooting, there was a stabbing in the community, I'd take out my flip-top camera, I'd upload that onto YouTube. And then what started to happen was nationally, people are like, yo, who's this guy from Birmingham talking about all of this type of stuff?
Craig is an award-winning outreach worker, transformational speaker, international gang exit strategist. He is also the CEO of Solve, the Center for Youth Violence and Conflict, Solve House Unlimited, and the Solve Premier League Life Skills Program. He is nationally and internationally known for working with potential high-risk offenders, victims of gang violence, and youth who are deemed most hard to reach.
But for those that know me from the block that I grew up in, they call me Little Craig because I was this little kid that was just running up and down. And just as I was about to get involved in something, you just hear Craig, and then my dad would just say, A lot of my friends were involved and kind of getting caught up into things. I was just seeing them on the weekends. I was around it all, but I just never participated in. I was at college playing basketball, doing sports. What had happened was I had ambition to go to America to play ball, and then in an English Cup final, Birmingham versus East Durham, I ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament, my right knee, and it took me out of the game. And that was my first level of depression. There was a murder that took place in my local community of a young innocent man, where young people that I used to work with were the perpetrators of that particular incident. With all of the work, the resources, they still go on and do these things. So my positionality had to change from believing that I could stop this to, can I reduce this?
How do you define leadership?
Leadership is
Welcome back to Everyday Leadership, the podcast where we delve behind the scenes into the lives of amazing leaders who are doing incredible things. We'll learn about them, how they lead themselves and how they lead others. And my guest today, I know him as this big, joyful character that I met years last year, actually. I was just like, I just felt that presence. I was like, I need to get to know this brother. I'm talking about the one and only Craig Pinkney. How are you doing, sir?
I'm feeling good. I'm happy. 2025 is a really interesting year for me because it's my final year of my PhD. So I'm just focused, locked in, and yeah, man, just ready to go.
In fact, you know what? Since you went there, I'm going to go there first. How are you navigating studying while holding down so many roles? And obviously, you're also a father, you're a family man, you're doing that as well. How are you managing to do it all?
I've got an amazing team. Yeah, my team are really good because I'm on the spectrum. I invest quite a lot in employing people that understand my mind. So the people that are in the office doing the admin, the diaries, the bookings, the ensuring that I'm in the right places where I need to be throughout the week. They enable me to do my talent, give me the opportunity to be able to study, but then also give me the opportunity to fit my children in around their activities. They're all into football. So I have quite a structured week. So I know it looks chaotic maybe on social media, but behind the scenes, I have very specific days where I deliver, days where I chill, days where I focus on my research, and days where I have meetings.
Have you always known that you were on the spectrum, or did you find out later on in life?
So it's interesting. I found out actually my third year of my undergrad. We had somebody that came in um, and spoke about dyslexia and autism, and there was like they're doing free tests. People want to do some tests, and I think they may have mentioned that they were giving out free laptops. So as you can imagine, or the black folk in the room looked at each other like, "Yo, we want some free laptops." So signed up for this test, and discovered quite a lot about myself that made so much sense because what it did is it took me back to secondary school where I struggled with a lot of my subjects, but I was always very articulate. I was always able to convey, if they gave me the opportunity to convey or articulate what it is that I was thinking, I'd be great. But it was about how do I process the information from the mind onto a piece of paper. And that's where I used to have the struggle. So when I discovered that I had dyslexia, and there was a number of things that kind of propped up in some of the tests, around how I am with individuals, how I am with, groupings of people. It just made so much sense. It just made so much sense. And when I then did my master's degree, I felt like I became a student, because then I understood how to learn. Because I remember when I did my undergrad, I kind of just followed what everybody else was doing. And it was funny because I used to have these friends that sat on my table, and they used to always run to the shop and buy post-it notes and pens and markers and all of these things. And I just thought that was the thing to do. So, me coming from Brum, I was the only person. I was at De Montfort University in Leicester. So, I spent all my student finance on doing all of the things that the other students were doing. So when my mum would call me like, how's uni? I'm like, yo, uni's good. Like, I've got my books, but then what used to happen was I used to get back to my room on an evening, and I was unable to read my own work. And then that was just a massive struggle in my undergrad. So when I got to master's level, the reason why it was so difficult for me at master's level is because I became a student and I understood then how to learn. And I wish I had learnt that probably from my first year in my undergraduate, and then the masters wouldn't have been so chaotic, because the masters for me was probably more difficult than my early years of my PhD, because I became, and now that I understand how to learn and I know how I process information, I just utilize that in the best way that I can. So if I'm trying to make sense of a book, I will always try and link with the author. I'll always try to find if they've done any podcasts, if they've done any interviews online, to try and make sense of what it is that they were trying to convey in their message through their book. And that seems to be the cheat code that I teach many of the students that I work with. I'm not old school in the sense that you have to read the book from start to end. But if you write a book, my brother, and I can say, listen, there's a chapter that you're writing. What is it you're trying to say? And you tell me in 5 minutes, I can reference that particular chapter, and I understand it. And if you ask me what it's about, I'm more likely going to be able to articulate what you meant, as opposed to reading it from the book and then being able to tell you. And I think there's a lot of our children and young people in our community that struggle in education, thinking they're stupid and they're not. And it's just a different way of learning.
So I was saying that I wonder if you being diagnosed so late in life and obviously going through the experience of school allows you to be able to see some of the kids that you work with and really truly see them, because you're not doing it from a theoretical perspective, you're doing it from a lived experience perspective.
Yes.
So you know how to be able to see the traits, talk to them, relate to them,
Yes.
not dismiss them. And there's nothing as powerful. I've been able to come down to someone's level and really feel like this person really gets me. And that way you get to open up, and a lot of the barriers that we see play out nowadays are no longer there as well.
And it's funny because I see myself in a lot of the young people that I work with every single day. And they continuously amaze me because they're gifted and they're talented, but they unfortunately are caught up within a system, that teaches and dictates that there's only one way, and them trying to navigate that can become quite difficult. And I guess our work and our life work is about how do we help those young people, specifically from our community, how they navigate that.
What were you like as a child? If I was to go back to 9-year-old Craig, what were you like then?
I was a mischievous young boy.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I was always in trouble. You know what I say it now is I argue now with my parents and my grandparents. I always say that they just didn't understand me. They didn't understand neurodivergence, you know. So me just wanted to jump on the chair and jump on the table and just do stuff like that. Like it wasn't because I wanted to be naughty. I just needed some different type of attention and some energy. But I think my dad was really good because he put me in a lot of kind of sports. I did kickboxing, I did karate, and I played basketball. So kind of my early years, that was kind of my distraction because the environment that I lived in, it was said to be by one of the elders that used to live on one of my streets. He used to say that he seen something in me for all the wrong reasons, and admitted that he was kind of grooming my peers and I because he's seen something in us. And when you hear an older say that, it's quite scary, but also enlightening in the sense that we as adults are able to see children in a light that sometimes they can't see in themselves. And individuals may potentially use that for the wrong reasons. Equally, individuals can use that for the right. So him seeing that I was probably gifted and talented and maybe outspoken and maybe I was prepared to do things with no fear. As you can imagine, in certain environments, that is currency, can be an asset.
So did you end up getting caught up in that life, or did you manage to avoid it?
I had a very strong father, you know, Caribbean. You know, I don't know, you remember the film Boys in the Hood?
I do.
Yeah, my dad was Lawrence Fishburne. Like, that was my dad. Yeah, like, yeah, so I was on a timer when I needed to come home. He used to say that if he calls my name from the front door and I can't hear him, that means I'm too far from the house. And even my boys would be just like, yo, Craig, your dad's calling you. And I was like, yeah, see the man them later. So when I think about it, I always remember I used to say to my older brother, I used to whisper, I hate him. I absolutely hate him. But now as I'm a grown man, I understand the work that he put in to ensure that I didn't get caught up in the things that was happening outside our front door. And for that, I always have to take my hat off him, living in that environment, struggling, striving, ensuring that, you know, they somehow found the money for me to go to Saturday school. I was a child in the Pan-Africanist movement. I used to go Saturday school. They found the money for me to do swimming and kickboxing and karate and all of those things that I explain as a distraction. That when a lot of my friends that were involved and kind of getting caught up into things, I was just seeing them on the weekends. So the link was there, but I was the kid and known as the kid up until this day that just didn't get caught up. But I seen it all. I was around it all, but I just never participated in. But I think it's also important to note that when I was growing up, it actually was a time where you could play outside and there wasn't a fear of, you know, beefs and tensions. And there were beefs and tensions, but it was very clear who was involved and who their opposition was. And they kind of just done their thing. And it was, I remember being able to play outside, and even if you had an opposing individual group in somewhere in the community that would say, I don't know where you from, or you could actually name drop someone, and they'd be like, cool, you know, we know where you're from, what street you're from, and it's all good. It's a different time now. So when I reflect on my younger days, you know, playing outside, playing Kirby's, playing hide and seek, tracking, you know, those are the days that make me smile. And now we're in a time where, you know, our children don't play outside anymore because we're in a very much a technological era. People are hypersensitive. People are anxious. People are scared. So it's just a different generation now. So I'm glad I grew up in the 90s. You know, I got to see some stuff, man. We didn't have social media. We had to go to the phone box and put 20p and bang it on the side, and hopefully the 20p runs again. That's my area.
You just talked about your your father and how growing up in that strict Caribbean household, even though you didn't like it at that point in time, it helped keep you on the straight and narrow. I'm curious, what are some of the other lessons that I guess both your mum and dad instilled and taught you that you might not have appreciated then, but now you definitely value?
My dad used to always say, education is the key. How was you just say, what are you talking about? Like, he never explained it. He always used to say, education is the key. And even though I was um, an individual that struggled with education, somehow I navigated through that. Because as I said, I had, an extra education compared to some of our peers from school. As I said, I was part of the Saturday school movement. So every Saturday, we had extra maths, we had extra English, we understood African history. So I found that when I was at primary school, that was when I had my first encounter with bullying. And it's interesting that they used to say to me that you're stupid. And I think that was their way of saying that I'm probably intelligent and I'm saying things that they don't understand. So therefore, as a collective, they would all say that I was
Was
stupid.
that the teachers?
No, they're my peers. Um, and you've also got put in context. This was before I had my growth spurt and the muscle started to grow. And then I started to dictate that nobody could put their hand on me, or it was a different time. This is when I was Little Craig. So for those that know me from the block that I grew up in, they call me Little Craig because I was this little kid that was just running up and down, mischievous, trying to hide everything from my mum and dad. And just as I was about to get involved in something, you just hear Craig, and then my dad would just like, you have to go back home. It's like I don't know if my dad just had spider senses that he just knew I was about to do something, and he'd call my name from that front door, and I just have to lads, sorry, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And but when I think about it in hindsight, and I think about the families that lived in my cul-de-sac. See, Birmingham is slightly different to London, where you guys have estates. We don't have that here. We've got mainly streets and cul-de-sacs, so similar to like Manchester and Liverpool and other cities. So in my little cul-de-sac, probably housed maybe 32 households. And out of that little cul-de-sac that I lived, it was our home and I think another were the only two households that had both a mum and a dad. So when I say some of the things that I'm saying to you, I think that context becomes really important as well as that I had that male that constantly kept saying, come in the house. Now it's time to come in. And he talked to me about friends. So when you talk about what are the lessons, education is the key. Watch your friends. You're going to get to a particular level and you're going to see particular behaviors from people that look like us, and stay focused. Always be willing to listen to your elders, you know, look after your elders, love your elders, regardless of what background that they come from, because they are the precious people in our community, the elders and the babies. Um, so when I think about those kind of initial um, thoughts, it definitely made me the man that I am today.
And I guess even without knowing it, having those extra maths, English lessons, and Pan Africanism, all those different elements actually still helped you navigate even a normal school. Because when you're dyslexic, it's a lot harder. But if you got that extra support in a different setting of
Yeah,
learning, then it just helps enhance the way that you think and approach things as well. So it just gave you that next step up that you might have struggled normally a lot more in school than you would have done in those spaces. And
yeah, most definitely.
it's powerful when you connect the dots that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I think about you and what you do now, where did that, I guess, that desire to go into like youth crime, youth violence, social conflict, all the different elements of stuff that you do now, where did that come from for you?
I think that came out of curiosity. So my family is well known in the Birmingham space. My grandparents are well known in the Birmingham community. In the early 60s, they opened up community provisions. So many of my uncles, and also I guess my dad being the youngest of his siblings, they grew in a family of community activists and community leaders. So I'd say part and part, it's attached to my DNA. But my curiosity around working with young people in the way in which I do now actually started when I left school with no GCSEs. I was doing some work for a local organization in the community, and it was actually teaching them basketball. And it was those early encounters with children and young people. I kind of started to see children in a different way and kind of seeing how even just from a young age, how easy they can get caught up in so many different issues and things. And then I guess my inspiration developed when I was, I guess, inspired by my youth workers at the time, because they always said to me, Craig, you'd be a really good youth worker. You know, with all this energy that you've got, you probably in the past used it for all the wrong things. And why don't you use your energy for, helping young people? And I guess when I was doing the volunteering, I was only doing it for money. So I didn't really see the benefit in it, even though I had that deep curiosity. So when I then became a student, it was only until I met an individual named Dr. Carlton Housen, and he challenged me at my core. I just remember one day him saying to me, without being rude, that you're just full of shit. And I was thinking, huh? You're talking to me, man from Brom. And what he was saying was, you guys, meaning the group that I was a part of, you guys are fake. What he wants is authenticity. You guys are not being your true selves. You're not allowing yourselves to be vulnerable. You're not allowing yourselves to explore yourself within. And he was saying concepts that it was bothering me, and it was funny because I remember sitting in the room and taking real offense. And I remember in the canteen we were all talking about we don't like this guy. I don't know what it is, but it drew me towards him. Carlton, like he used to dress like a Black Panther. He had his berry on every day. He'd have all black, his boots on. And remember, because I'm coming from that old school movement, I think that's what it was. So even though he was speaking some hard truths about how we're trying to navigate and exist within this institution, it felt like it was somebody from the Saturday school I used to attend many, many years ago that was speaking to me in a different light. And I guess that's when I developed that relationship with Carlton. And he essentially carried me through that 3 years. And he was challenging this notion about me living a double life. And he introduced me to the concept of double consciousness. So he was saying that, Craig from Birmingham with your friends and your cousins and your peers, and then you've got the Craig that's here at university. And he was saying the Craig that he knows, that he's met, he's saying that's the Craig that needs to show his authentic self, because this is the person that's going to make change within society. So I was kind of dealing with that for a period of time. And, it's interesting that when I graduated um, from the university, me and him took a picture together. Until this day, that picture's on his top shelf, and he tells his students that was the guy.
Can you explain to me how do you go from leaving school with no GCSEs to sounds like not really knowing what you wanted to do next with your life to then going to university, having a master's, you're doing your PhD now, but more importantly, becoming a lecturer for a number of years as well? Like, how?
I've always been very skillful in understanding systems and somehow finding loopholes within systems. And it's funny because when I left school with no GCSEs, remember I said that I used to play basketball. So at the time, I used to play for a team called Birmingham Excel, was also linked to Birmingham Bullets, which was the regional team at that time. So the head coach that I used to play for then got a job at the local college. And because he was the best at the time, the college seen it as a good opportunity to win some championships. So he said that whatever deal he had was with them was that, can I invite then my players to come to the college and do a course? So it made sense that I did sport, probably worst course that I do, and it's something that I always challenge our young people not to do when they go to college. But it was my only way in. You know, Herman being our coach, that was his name, Herman. He was in the sports department. He needed his basketball team in the college. They enrolled us without even looking at our history and our past. So me being on that national diploma started my conveyor belt of doing that. Because prior to doing that, I actually did 1 year at college, which ended badly. I actually did performing arts. So out of all my GCSEs, I actually got 1A, which was in performing arts and drama. So I used that to go to college, but it wasn't a national diploma. Some of you may remember back in the day it was BTEC first. So you do BTEC first and then you went on to the national diploma. So when I did my BTEC first on there, I kind of had a knack for, again, remember I said articulation was my thing. So performing was a thing. And then when I actually think about my early stages of speaking, I think that's where I learned most and developed most of my skills. So then when I was at college playing basketball, doing sports, what had happened was I had the ambition to go to America to play ball. Most of my boys were in a really good position to get scholarships and get opportunities abroad. And then in an English Cup final, Birmingham versus East Durham, I ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament in my right knee, and it took me out of the game. And that was my first level of depression because, as you can imagine, my boys are now getting signed. My boys are going to America. Some of them have gone to Europe. And I'm just like, and then it's funny because whilst I was in pain, recovering, I wasn't able to go upstairs. So I had to sit downstairs and lie and make the front room my bedroom. My dad said to me one night, "This is why I said education is the key." And that was the worst thing he could have said to me at that time. Remember, I'm angry. I'm angry with the world. I'm
Depressed
angry
and
with life.
everything.
Because, and just before he turned off the light, he said, "This is why I said education is the key." But that's not what I wanted to hear. But it was interesting because I have to remind people about how important mentorship is. And those early youth workers that I said inspired me were the ones that were pouring into me and saying, now is a really good opportunity to develop yourself. So that kind of was the initial stage of then meeting Carlton. And then when I graduated, I then had my first opportunity as a senior youth worker managing a local well-known youth centre in my area known as Oakland Youth Centre. And that was I believe, my beginning. I was watching and observing young men, funny, gifted, talented, amazing human beings. But over a course of about 4 to 7 years, I started to witness many of those young people exploit other young people in my community. I started to witness many of them take the lives of other young people in our community. Some of them ended up in mental health institutions. Some of them got paralyzed and some of them died. And that's where my curiosity developed and why I then wanted to go into the academic space. So how I got that link between working as a youth and community worker and then going into the academic space, there was a European project known as the EU Gangs Project. And it was a number of European partners that wanted to basically come together to understand serious youth violence and essentially train individuals within their setting of how to develop a basically framework to respond to violence within their context. So I got a call from the University College Birmingham, and they said that they're looking for professionals with lived experience to support with the program, a part of this wider project. So I was like, cool. My manager in the council allowed it. And then what had happened was when I was delivering on this particular program with the participants, there was a bit of an issue. The issue wasn't about me, but it was more about my delivery, because there was other practitioners that were delivering on this program, and the participants felt that some of the other academics that were from the university wasn't speaking from a frontline experience, that I wasn't a way in which I was conveying it enabled them to have a real depth understanding. So then the university came to me and said, would I be willing to basically take lead on this project and deliver more? So as you can imagine, I was faced with an ultimatum because I got a full-time job here at this youth centre. And then I went for a meeting, and my old manager and also mentor, Dr. Sangita Soni, she just said, "Listen, Craig, this is the budget, but then also I can promise you actual lecturing within the college, with the hope of then going into the university, because it was a quarter college, three quarters university." And I looked at the numbers and I was like, "Listen, I just had a son. Let's do it." And I made that transition from youth and community work into the academic space. But I was leading on this gangs project. And then the good thing about that is the doors then started to open. I was invited to go to Romania. I was invited to go to Greece. I was invited to go to places like Spain. And then I think that I was in a really interesting time where a lot of people were paying attention to what I was talking about. And I think what was really good about my early beginnings of how people kind of acknowledge is that I was very sharp and aware of social media at that time. And you may remember flip top cameras. You remember them HD flip top cameras? So I remember buying those from Curry's. I don't know, I don't know, Comics. I think I may have been. I don't even know if Comics still exist. And I brought one of those flip top cameras for about £80. And then what would happen was I would document my experiences. So every time there was a shooting, there was a stabbing in the community, I'd take out my flip top camera. I'd open with, yo, my people, this is what's going on in the community. I'd upload that onto YouTube. And then what started to happen was nationally, people are like, yo, who's this guy from Birmingham talking about all of this type of stuff? And then I started to get invited to speak at different spaces. And then I developed a documentary slash film, and it incorporated all of the young men that I worked with in the community, and we titled it Advice to a Son. And all I was getting those young men to do was speak to their younger self and give one piece of advice. So as you can imagine, it's the man them. So people are like, how did you get these men on this platform doing this? And then as you can imagine, when that then started to, get, quite a lot of traction, then the sisters were like, yo, what about us? And then that's when I did Advice to a Daughter. And I think that for me was where the national scene and people started to become aware of who Craig Pinkney was. And it was at that particular time, my other OG mentor I connected with, Raymond Douglas. And this is how I met Ben Lindsay. And this is how I started to meet the crew that were doing very similar things to me around. And I guess, time just goes really, really fast. I was lecturing at, UCB. I moved to the university and started teaching youth and community studies, criminology, criminal justice, offender management. And I just found my lane, that my gift was being able to articulate this academic thing and convey it to our people. And that's why I title myself the street academic, of bridging that gap between academia and the street, and aligning that to enable those young people, young men, young women that may not necessarily have the knowledge of the professors, but can they articulate it and understand it in a way that made sense to them? And I guess, like when we started, I was speaking to my young dyslexic self, that can I teach you a theory that I don't need to give you 10 books And can I convey it in a way and give you an analogy that enables you to have a better understanding of it, that you can run with it and utilize it in order for you to do what you need to do?
Wow, that's powerful. And it's as I listen to you speak, something comes to mind around when, in fact, let me ask you this question. How important is it to be a practitioner, not a theorist? Because you see a lot of people talking about streets, youth, violence, all the different elements and stuff like that. But then to your point you made earlier on, part of what happened at the start was it sounds like you had a lot of theorists, but not practitioners like you that could actually be like, no, here's the reality of this. This is not in a book. This is how things are actually playing out. So how important is that, especially when you're involved in areas like this where you have, for one better word, got your hands dirty, not necessarily being on the front streets doing, but you've been involved in one way, shape or form to really understand the life, the culture, the personalities of the people that you're trying to help?
I think both has its power and its importance. I love scholarship. I think it's important that I say that first. I love scholarship. I love the scholars. I love individuals that are able to think and able to convey things in ways in which will enable me to make society or my community better. However, the scholarship that I connect with are scholars of which remove themselves from what I call the ivory tower and go down to ground zero and connect with the people. So one of my early frustrations when I was working within the community, I started to acknowledge a level of exploitation that was slightly different to the exploitation that I was speaking about and fighting against within community. And I'll give you an example. So what would happen is somebody from one of the local universities would come to our youth center and say that they're doing a really interesting study about young people, violence, whatever it may be. And they wondered if we would love to be a part of it and help us get participants, meaning young people. And they would pay us per interview. So as you can imagine, my part-time staff, the volunteers, remember, we're connected to all of these young people. And we're thinking, listen, if we're going to get 40, 50, 60 pounds for an interview, listen, I can get you 20 kids right now. Now, what would happen is we would go through that particular process, get all of this data, give it to these up and coming doctors, up and coming professors. They do their academic study in the university, and then we never see them again. And then through the grapevine, I may look on the news or I may read something trending online. And the same people that came to the youth center are now in Australia, they're now in the Caribbean, they're now in the United States of America, talking about this amazing research, of which we don't ever get the invite. So one of the things that I started to get frustrated with is, one, the fact that people would dangle these carrots of finance in our community, and we just openly, without actually thinking ethically and morally about the impact of our participants, meaning our young people. And I remember one of my mentors saying to me, Craig, you need to stop doing that and you need to do the research yourself. And you need to stop youth workers from doing that. And if we are going to do that, it has to be proper collaboration. Meaning the youth workers also have to, or be given an opportunity to contribute to the insights, as opposed to just giving our children to these individuals and they collect that particular data. And that's why I was interested in research. I wanted to be the individual that, acknowledges and understands the insights from the people that I've lived amongst. And that's the reason why I also talk about the approach that I take is called the insider perspective. I'm from my community. I understand my community, my grandparents, my parents, my cousins, my friends are still in that community. I'm still able to go to the jerk shop up the road, and I'm able to go to local events and feel at ease. And why I talk about individuals that sit at the ivory tower that look down on society and come up with theories and data based on numbers. I get the insight that not a lot of people have that access to. And I think that's where my research, one, may be groundbreaking, but also as a point of inspiration for up and coming academics. And I was at a conference last week. It was a part of the Black Criminology network. And I openly said, students need to stop emailing me and asking me to bring young people to them to be interviewed for their assignments. Because my young people that I work with are not just for assignments, they're human beings. And until I see you in the community, until I see you volunteering within the community, what the lecturers need to stop doing is giving my details to the students and expecting them to just roll young people out, because this is what I talk about in that second level of exploitation.
I love that. That is powerful, but that's also very confronting. And I love how you framed it around recognizing how it can easily get used and how people can dangle things in front of us and just get exploited that way. So even going through that difficult period, but it was one that opened your eyes to what's actually happening, is powerful because the exploitation is real. And it sends like shockwaves all the way through when you're already dealing with people who sometimes their sense of worth and sense of self is not at the highest level as it is. And then you're having people talk about it in a particular way, it can make you feel down even more. So having people like you in that space for me, it's powerful. And I'm actually curious, I'm flipping it the other way around. For someone who is known for working with some of the like country's most like challenging young people, high risk offenders, victims of gang violence, what are some of the lessons you've learned from them that other people can also learn from?
We need to rest. We need to, and it's something that Ben Lindsay taught me when I went on a retreat with him and Professor Colin Furman, that we need to figure out how to navigate trauma better. Um, and the strapline is rest is resistance. We believe that this idea and notion that we just have to keep going because it's just us. We pour so much into the cup of community that sometimes we forget ourselves. And I say one of my biggest fears, and I'm going to explain why because it connects to something historical. One of my biggest fears is that I get to a place where my son says to me, Dad, you're a waste man. And the reason why I think you're a waste man is because you poured so much into other kids, but you never poured into me. And I say that because historically, when I was coming up, I mentioned that mentorship has been so important. And along with my dad and the Rastafarian community that I was brought up under, and also the Irish community, there was loads of mentors in the community and there was loads of community provisions. And you heard me mention the Saturday school movement. But what was interesting is that some of those, what I call community leaders, children, are some of the most violent, well-known gang members, criminals in our community today. And these are the questions as researchers that I have to ask. Could it be that the amazing work that those human beings did and they poured into young men like me to make me the way that I am now, that they forgot their own children? So when you ask that question, what do I learn from individuals? I see a lot of burnout. I see a lot of savior complexes where people believe that they can save the world. And I think I don't see enough self-care and I don't see enough rest. And that's the reason why now in my life, I've shifted my positionality around this whole agenda. And that really shifted and changed when I won't talk too much about the incident, but there was a murder that took place in my local community of a young innocent man, where young people that I used to work with were the perpetrators of that particular incident. And then the second thing was a young man that I actually, look at him as like a son, then paralyzed a innocent 13-year-old boy in our community. And I look at those two particular incidents and I just sometimes think, with all of the, the work, the resources, our own money, our own shelter that we've give to these humans, and then they still go on and do these things. So my positionality had to change from believing that I could stop this to can I reduce this? And because I now know I can reduce instead of stop, it enables me to sleep at night, that when I'm out there in the community, if I can save one young buck out there, then I'm good, man. I'm good, and it generally makes me sleep at night.
It's powerful. Do you ever talk to your kids about some of those fears that you have and have that conversation just to make sure that you're also locked in with them as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like my dad in a strange way, but not as aggressive. Um, um, I understand distraction and privilege. I understand it. I understand my privilege is that I've worked so hard that I've got the finance to keep my kids distracted. And why that is a privilege is because when I meet so many families that can't afford, my son goes one-to-one football outside of normal football, and that's what, £60 a week. My daughter does dance, and they're all involved in different sports and whatnot. Now that's expensive. And, I meet families where their children are equally as talented and the opportunities are not there. So I say that, I am always very mindful about when I'm saying things to people that I speak to all communities, and I'm saying that I understand privilege and I understand distraction. So I think that having those distractions for my children and having opportunity for them to find purpose through the things that they're doing distracts them from the chaos that we read and we see. And that doesn't ultimately protect every child, because we know that kids even get caught up now, even walking to and from school. But it definitely puts them in a different position compared to the way in which I was brought up and a lot of the kids that I work with. So we have loads and loads of conversations about that. I work a lot, and I've somehow been bullied into getting mobile phones because you don't talk every single day. And my daughter, she's a 12-year-old version of me. She's articulate, and she'll just say, "Dad, listen, we need to communicate. We need to talk. You need to ensure that I'm safe. So I need one of these mobile phones. I won't take it to school. I won't take it outside the house unless I'm with a family member." And I'm convinced. And we talk, we communicate, we connect. Last night, I was working in Scotland, and we on FaceTime and we WhatsApp and we were laughing and we joking. So the connection's forever there. And then I just think about, again, those families that I work with every single day that don't have that opportunity. And I think we have to, acknowledge our privilege sometimes. And that privilege has come from the hard work that I've put in over the years to put me in that situation where we can just be like, well, you know what, let's be distracted for a moment.
The other day, I wrote something in my newsletter and I called it the power of privilege. And I say a lot of times when we talk about privilege, people always talk about it in a negative light. As I actually, there are a lot of positives from privilege. There are a lot of examples that privilege can give us that help to steer us in the right direction, but also give us a lot of real lasting memories. Like what I talked about was going on holiday with my parents and how the example my parents set for me, I brought into my household. And now me, my wife, and my kids always talk about all the different holidays we go on once a year, because that's the time when it's just family time. No phones, no nothing. It's just we're all locked in. So there are things that privilege can give us, which we work hard to get to. So listening to you talk about that, distraction of privilege, for me, it's such an important topic, and one that we also need to recognize as we are navigating life, as especially for those in areas where you're pouring out into other people, It's just understanding that ecosystem that you're building and creating, but what you're also providing for those around you, and both the good and the bad that can come from it as well.
And I think as well, as a community, privilege has always been that kind of topic that we've been kind of scared to talk about. We don't want to be seen as privileged. We don't want to be seen as and one of the things that I learned from that retreat that I went on with Ben, and really kind of looking into the Trisha Hersey's concepts around restive resistance, is this idea that we come from environments and communities that we have to always demonstrate that we're struggling, and like struggling somehow is seen as currency and status. And I think it's so important that we talk about those privileges, because for me also that's where self-care comes in. And me, just having the opportunity to be able to, I don't know, pay for a better gym that has a swimming pool, that has a sauna, that has a steam room, that enables me to just go there for wellness as opposed to just lifting weights. That's privilege. Privilege that I'm able to, travel. I travel a lot. I love to travel the world, and those things are privilege. And this is not me, speaking from a space of being boastful. But I think it's also important that we as a people, acknowledge our graft. We acknowledge each other and give each other our flowers whilst we're here, to say, you know what, you put in the work. I've been doing this work for over 20 years since I've left school, and I've never turned away, and I've worked really hard, and I don't shy away from my accolades. I don't shy away from the hard work that I've put in, because we also have to breathe life into the young men that are also looking at us. Remember, the counter narrative that we're pushing has to be that, you can be young men from the ends that are doing very legitimate things and also making money. So when you're looking at the individuals from the community that are doing the negative things and showing nice cars and doing all of these different things, we are the counter narrative. So we have to also demonstrate and show to our young people in a way in which is safe, and is also ways in which enables them to look at a different lens, that we are also in the community doing very legitimate things and also move in a certain type of way. So I don't shy away from the fact that I've got a nice car. I don't shy away from the fact that I have nice things, because that's the counter narrative. And it's not about buying into capitalism. So I have to also make that very clear. But I'm talking about masculinity. I'm talking about challenging hyper masculinity. I'm talking about identity, and showing young men that there are different types of men that exist within community, and it's not just one type of man that makes money through a particular lifestyle, because we are here.
Jeez. Craig came with a sermon this morning. Like, that was powerful. It's interesting you mention this now, because when I think about that, and I think about I'm going to call it the hyper masculinity that's really front and center now. It's been bubbling over the last couple of years, but now when you look at even some of the leaders of companies like Meta and Mark Zuckerberg talking about hyper masculinity, it is like front and center, away from even the Andrew Tates of the world, but right there in corporate culture level and everything else. And being able to have a different example modeled and talked about, which is why I like the way that you talk, the authenticity that you have when listening to people like Jason Wilson and talking about masculinity, all those different elements. It showcases something that really muddles but touches the soul when you listen to you talk, when you listen to you show up, because it's not fake, it's real, but it's showing that I can be real, I can do me, I can stand my own authenticity, my identity, I can come from where I come from, and I don't have to conform to what society thinks, and I can still be successful without also then going down the stereotypical routes of music or sports. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are other ways of actually living your life down a nice legal path with a good family, and this is what it kind of looks like. And I think those are powerful models that we need to see more and more of.
Yeah, indeed. And then it goes back to what we were just saying previously, that we believe, and I say not us, but there's a belief sometimes rooted within sometimes our culture that in order to be seen and heard, you have to kind of demonstrate you've lived this kind of lifestyle and you've been some individual that's gone through this massive transition. And that's not everybody's story. Some people go to college and university, and some people work 9 to 5s, and some people, find their ways trapped in the education system in all the wrong ways and bounce back. There are so many stories that need to be shown, but I think our children only get one narrative, and I think that's also part of the problem. And we buy into that narrative without even knowing. And one of the things I talk about a lot in my work quite recently is that we need to stop using toxicity to challenge toxicity.
Ooh, that's yeah. I hear that. I hear that. One thing that you mentioned earlier was when you set up your organization, you put people around you that effectively help you to be the best leader with your dyslexia and everything else like that, and help you to navigate your time to ensure you are where you are and you're doing what you need to do at the right time. What other things did you set up and build when you was creating Solve to ensure that you have this amazing organization that's doing amazing work that it's doing on so many different fronts, like nationally and internationally?
Mentorship is key. I love my elders. So if anybody knows my mentors, they're a lot older than me. Um, and I really find them quite useful, because none of them are in my kind of area of expertise, but I value wisdom, just like I value the wisdom that comes from my nan. I value wisdom. I think the other thing is identifying skill sets, and individuals that are exceptional in the things that they do. I acknowledge from quite early that I couldn't do this work alone. I was burning out quite a lot. I think that was in the beginning when I had that kind of savior complex. I was burning out quite a lot. I ended up in hospital a few times. Um, and when I realized that it can't just be me, I then started then to invest in people. And those people were my friends and peers that are also doctors, also ahead of the game in terms of psychology and criminology and person-centered therapy and whatever it may be. And all I did was create an environment where individuals that have a series of expertise, I know what the need is, create a series of programs, and then just say, Dr. Lizzie, you go there, Dan, you go there, Dr. Mo, you go there, Dr. Glynn, you go there, and then I can just stay in my lane and do my gift and my talent. And then, as I said, having those amazing people behind the scenes that enable the diaries to be aligned and everybody to be in the places that they need to be. Having those individuals around enable me then to then want to do other things. So if I just give you this kind of a snapshot of my week, so Monday and Tuesdays we call money making days. Those will be the 2 days that I go out and I do generally some big delivery. Wednesdays and Thursdays are my university days slash peace of mind day, where I have the opportunity for me to be innovative. Friday, I only have 20 to 30 minute meetings online, again, because of my neurodivergence. Me sitting on a Zoom or Teams for an hour and a half, unless I'm delivering something, it's not. You can send me the information in the text or an email. So we've scheduled loads of 20-minute meetings on that Friday. Saturday, normally I'm on call, if we need any help or support within the children's home. And then Sunday is normally my day of rest, where I don't do anything. But whilst I give you that seven day week, there are moments and periods, as I said, where I make sure I'm going to the gym. I'm making sure that I'm spending time with some of my loved ones. I'm also making sure that my activities that my kids are engaged in, that I'm present and I'm also engaged. And it's funny because I don't like football, but my kids love football. So I've become, even though I work in football, I don't actually like the sport. I normally just post things just to irritate a lot of my friends that are football guys, because I just find it really, really hilarious how individuals that don't live in the cities or come from the cities that they support and they love these people so much. But that's a story for another day. But being what I call myself now, a football dad, has been a really interesting couple of years for me. You know, my son's doing really well at the minute. You know, he's got a couple of trials coming up. So it's just, being a part of that. So my week is structured in a way that enables me to be able to, do the things that I need to do. And I think that's what what this journey for me now is all about. Freedom is I'm doing things that enable me to be free. So when you ask about what did I do to kind of connect my kind of expanding soul, I also acknowledge I needed to, do different things with different people. So Solve, as you know, is kind of an umbrella term because there's four companies that sit under Solve. So we've got the Centre for Youth Violence and Conflict, which is what most people are familiar with. That's the delivering, whether it's to professionals or to children and young people. And then you've got Solve Global, which is the Premier League stuff that you probably see me doing and the consultancy stuff. And then you've got Solve Housing, where you've got the children's homes. We've got 2 homes in the West Midlands. And then now we've got Solve Online Learning Hub. So 3 of those organizations have different business partners. And again, it's about their skills and their expertise because I realize it can't just be me. And how can I share the load with some of my close friends and people that I've grew around that also have the same insight and passion to do this particular work. And forever growing, I'm always welcoming a new opportunity, a new business. But that's where my mind is now, freedom. I want to have that freedom to be around my family. I want to have that freedom, to chill with my nan a little bit longer. Whereas the days of every single day I was on the train in London, in Bristol, in Dublin, having to travel to America. And whilst it looks good, I was tired. But I don't feel as tired anymore now because my weeks are structured now. And it's not just me doing things. So even though I said I may work on a Monday and Tuesday, we've got members of the team that are doing things on loads of different days and doing so many different things, whether it's mentoring, whether it's workshops, whether it's training. That was the plan. And that's the blueprint that I also now want to give the younger brothers and sisters coming up. Don't be like me, be better than me. Try and see the gaps and see where I worked. And how I learned that from my mentor is that when I first sat at the feet of one of my early scholars, Dr. Martin Glynn, I just remember going to his little flat that wasn't too far where I lived, and I was like, listen, if being a doctor in criminology is going to make me live like this, I don't want to do academia. And we always laugh about that because I was what we were learning from each other is, whilst I loved the wisdom, whilst I loved the knowledge, I didn't want to put myself financially in a situation that my family and those around me were then going to have to struggle. I want to utilize this knowledge that's going to benefit me financially, but also be able to benefit my people and community. And now look, I've got companies now where I'm able to employ people from the community. And whilst we're ensuring that individuals are paying their bills and supporting their families and going on holidays and whatnot, I'm also providing a service to those within the community that are in need.
There's something that strikes me very, very important about you, and you're someone that I'll say that really lives in that mode of Kaizen, that continuous improvement, where you're always looking at, okay, I did that worked, it didn't work, I did that, how can I improve and do better? I used to experience burnout, how do I ensure that this doesn't happen again? I recognize these things about myself with dyslexia, how do I put stuff around me and bring other people on board? I know what kind of lifestyle I want to have. So how do I ensure that I can still do that, but do that in my own way, but I still do what I'm purposeful about and making a difference? And you're just consistently learning from those mentors, learning from your experiences, bringing them together and iterating over and over and over again. And that's something that's really, really powerful about your journey when I listen to you talk and share.
As I said in the beginning, that sometimes I sit and I reflect and think, how did little Craig from Hockley get here?
Oh, Big Craig now.
Big Craig now. Or the new people will see me as Big Craig, but all the originals and the foundation people from my ends, they still call me Little Craig, despite the muscles and the loudness. But I've always described myself as a big cuddly bear.
If you're wondering what we're talking about, Craig's what? You're 6'2", 6'3"? Yeah. Craig is a big, muscly guy. So listen to talk about little Craig. It's like, what happened?
I think it was year 10. I just had a growth spurt, and then those things got crazy. And but yeah, I always tell people, don't make the glasses fool you.
And just to wrap this up, question I was asked at the end: how do you define leadership?
Leadership is a process of which an individual understands their purpose, learns all of the tools that is required to make change, and then leads from behind.
And I can see that in your journey that you've just kind of shared with us over the last plus hour. And it is, I think the word that keeps on coming to mind over and over again is powerful and role model. Those are two words I think really exemplify your journey, but also exemplify what you're doing right now. Because it's great to be able to hear people like you who are in the mix of the work, who are making a difference, but then also talking about the different ways of how you are showing up and growing as an individual, as a leader, as a father, as a CEO of a company with multiple facets. And being able to like, no, I recognize there are things I need to do better and I'm working on them, or this is the model I have to works for me. What is your model? But that consistent role modeling piece for me, like the more and more we can get people like you and your voice is heard, I think that's what's going to make the biggest shift to the next generation in particular coming up, as opposed to anything else that we're seeing or reading or hearing about right now as well. So your work is appreciated. Thank you. How you can get involved with Craig and the different areas of Solve is all available in the show notes. You can go online, you can go on their Instagram page where you can learn a lot more. Craig.talks, like I said right at the start, is a keynote speaker. You've heard some of his journey. You want to get this man into your organization to really listen to what it's like and to really listen to how you can also work and partner, because that's something he's really all about. How do you partner with people rather than just thinking he can do it by himself? That's not going to get you anywhere. So get involved, lock in with Craig, tap into his journey, and let's make a difference as we go forward. Thank you once again for coming on Everyday Leadership, Craig. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, King.
This is Everyday Leadership. We will see you all next week.